Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Chala, Perek Aleph, Halacha Vav, and God willing, starting the second chapter, Perek Beis, Halacha Aleph. We're learning today Daf Tez Zayin, and we left off on Daf Tez Zayin all the way on top of the Amid, again, beginning with the new Mishnah. So first, this Mishnah is going to enumerate, it's going to list not a comprehensive list, but many laws in which Chala and Truma are common, have the same rules. Indeed, Chala is also called Truma, as we'll see more in the Mishnah. Happens to be that the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish concerning Chatzi Shir, whether it is Asur Midoiraisa or not Asur Midoiraisa, even their ground zero machlokes is regarding eating half of the shir, for which one will be chayiv a penalty. Everyone holds that if you don't eat the minimum amount, you won't get the penalty. The question is, are you violating a biblical prohibition? Rabbi Yochanan holds chatzi shir asur min haTorah. Reish Lakish holds chatzi shir is asur midrabanan, but it's not asur min haTorah. And this machlokes will mamish affect the way we will learn pshat in our Mishnah, as we will see. We're going to have on this daf a famous chazal. The quote, the actual words are only found in the Yerushalmi, all the way brought down in Shulchan Aruch, that eser mitzvos adam oisa ad shelo yochel prusa, that even prior to eating a piece of bread, there were already 10 mitzvahs done with that bread that's in front of us. And indeed, one of the reasons why when we make the bracha of hamoitzi, ideally, we should extend all of our 10 fingers, in other words, both hands, and place them on the bread, which is common practice, especially on Shabbos and Yontif. It's to remind us of these 10 mitzvahs, as we'll learn in the Gemara, and as we're going to actually learn a piece of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. Now, the Gemara, prior to closing this chapter, will cite two additional laws in which Truma and Chala share a common, share something in common that are not mentioned in the Mishnah, which is something very common. The Mishnah never has to give a comprehensive list, but whatever is not given in the Mishnah, or some of what's not given in the Mishnah, will be complemented in the Gemara. This is more or less a synopsis of today's daf all the way until the end of the first chapter. The second Perek, and we're going to learn today, God willing, the entire first Mishnah, will first speak about the status of produce that grew outside Eretz Yisrael, but was imported inside the Holy Land and kneaded into dough in the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael. And as we will see, that Vadai, according to all of the Tanoim, as we kept on mentioning, that what triggers the obligation of Chala? The kneading of the flour into dough. If that step happened in Eretz Yisrael, for sure, Chala has to be separated, even though the grain grew outside Eretz Yisrael. Now, just to make it clear, don't get confused. Midrabanan, we do this nowadays. When we make any type of bread outside Eretz Yisrael, we fulfill the rabbinic mitzvah of separating Chala. But we're talking about the D'oraisa obligation of separating Chala is connected to the Holy Land, but it's not connected where the grain grew. It's connected where the dough was kneaded. Now, what about in the other direction? What happens if you have grain that grew in Eretz Yisrael? It was exported as flour or grain, and outside Eretz Yisrael, it was kneaded into dough. Well, if you're going to say that the trigger of Chala is where the dough is kneaded, biblically, you would then argue it will be exempt of Chala, midoiraisa. But in that direction, we're going to have a machlokes tanoim, as we'll see in the Mishnah. According to everyone, even if the grain grew outside Eretz Yisrael, if it was kneaded in Eretz Yisrael, vada yerchayev Chala midoiraisa. If the grain grew in the Holy Land and you exported it and you only made it into dough outside, we'll have a machlokes tanoim whether still it might be chayev with Chala midoiraisa. We will also have a discussion in the Mishnah about what's the status of produce that's grown in imported soil that came michutz la'aretz. It was put in a ship. The ship is already in the territorial boundaries of Eretz Yisrael. And while it's inside the territory of Israel, it's in the ocean. Something grew out of that soil. Now, there's a lot of details that we'll have to leave for the Gemara. We're speaking about a type of ship that halachically allows for the soil in it to be considered connected to the soil on the floor of the sea. Whether it's a earthenware ship, whether it's a wooden ship, we're going to leave that more for the next year. But whenever you have such a connection, we're going to have such a discussion, because on one hand, it's connected to the soil of Israel. On the other hand, the soil itself was put in the ship from who knows where, from anywhere in Chutz La'aretz. And what will be the status? What will be the status of its produce concerning Maisris, concerning Shvius? Another topic we'll have in this Mishnah will be what will be the status of dough that was needed b'mei pedis. Guys, mei pedis, fruit juices, refers to any juice that's not from the 7 liquids. It won't have the koyach to be machshir. We're gonna repeat this in more detail when we learn it inside. But will the dough be considered a dough? Are you chayiv to do hafrashas challah? Or is it only if you made it from one of the 7 liquids? That will be in the Mishnah. And the final law in the Mishnah will be what will be the status of separating challah when the person doing it is unclothed. Now, what is the issue of being unclothed? Not the actual separating of the challah, but the bracha that one should make prior to doing any mitzvah, including the mitzvah of afrashas challah. One may not take Hashem's name while unclothed. So can you be mafresh challah when you're unclothed? We're going to see the difference between a man and a woman as we will conclude that Mishnah. Chevra, without any further ado, Daf Tez Zayin, we're dedicating this class, L'Refuah Shalema, to Habacher Hatamim Michal ben Nechamadina, all the way on top, halacha vav. Okay. Says the Mishnah, both challah and truma have the following laws in common. Number 1, chayavin aleihem misa, meaning if a non-kohen will partake of this, either challah or truma b'mezid, knowing that it's food designated for the kohen, they're going to be chayiv misa b'dei shamayim. Look inside the top marafulda. We're going to make today a marafulda day. Chayiv aleihem misa, zor ha'oichel mezid, chayiv misa b'dei shamayim. And why is that? Because challah, truma nikras, is also called in the Torah with the word of truma. The word truma is used for challah. And regarding truma ksiv, it says vayikra chav beis, which is parshas Emoir, umeisu boy ki yechalaluhu. If a non-kohen eats truma, they'll die, and that death is not capital punishment, but it's misa b'dei shamayim. So whatever Hashem says regarding the punishment of truma also applies to challah. Keep your finger in the marafulda, 3 lines from the top. We're going back into the Mishnah. And v'choimish, interestingly, just to remind ourselves, Aviv, remember, choimish is only when a person ate truma b'shoigeg, inadvertently. Look inside the marafulda. The choimish ha'oichlan shoigeg, there's no misa b'dei shamayim. But it's not enough for the person to pay back the value of the truma that he accidentally took from the kohen. In addition, you have to pay the 5th. Now, another detail, he's just a good review. The keren, Aviv, let's say you're a kohen, just an example, and truma was given to you by me or by anyone, and I ate it. God forbid, I didn't know. B'shoigeg. Who do I owe the money to? The principal I owe to the owner, to you. The penalty of choimish, I get to give to any coin that I want. The choimish ha'oichlin shoigeg mishalem kerem leba'alim. And v'choimish, which is really 25, not the 25%, what we would call a halachic 20%. L'chol koyin sheyirtza, it's a penalty. I'm not compensating the loss of the koyin. And indeed, the choimish I am allowed to give, I can choose to whom to give it to. Now, next line, and keep your fingers on the marafulda, 4 lines from the top, back in the Mishnah. Va'asura lezarim, both challah and truma are not allowed to be eaten by a non-kohen. Now, let me ask you a question. What is the Mishnah saying? Didn't we just say, if you eat it b'mezid, you chayv kares? If you eat it b'shoigeg, you got to pay keren v'choimish. What does that imply? Aviv, you're not allowed to eat it. So why does the Mishnah have to say again that a non-kohen cannot eat it? It doesn't work. So here is where the machlokes of Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish will come into play, how to understand the pshat in the Mishnah. According to Rabbi Yechanan, that says that chatzi shir is asur min ha-Torah. So that's the meaning of the Mishnah. Va'asura lizarim. That's the way the Marafulda learns the Mishnah. Lishitas Rabbi Yechanan. That what the the achal kishir. If the Mishnah would have been talking about someone who ate the kazayas, the Mishnah just said. Not only is it asur, the Mishnah already spoke about the penalty. Harei yesh b'chi of misa or chaimish. Ella in the Maraful, the 5 lines from the top. This line in the Mishnah is lepachus mishir itzrach. Is to come and tell you that even if a person is planning to eat less than a kazayis, the ike isura de oiraisa. According to Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbeinu HaKadosh is saying it's asur to eat the shir with the penalty, and if you're eating less than the shir, then it's prohibited. Mid de oiraisa. Now, obviously, Reish Lakish will not learn that pshat in the Mishnah. Reish Lakish holds chatzi shir is not asur mid de oiraisa. So therefore, Darash Shirilio, around four lines from the top, I'm going in already in the middle of the Divrei HaMaschal v'Chaimish, says something gavaldik. According to Reish Lakish, the meaning of Va'asura Lezarim means the Chaimish, that the person who ate Truma b'shoigig, whom he can give the Chaimish to any coin that he wants. What's the status of that Chaimish? One could have understood that chaimish is a financial penalty, but that chaimish is not imbued with the kedusha of truma / chala, which then would mean that if someone eats the chaimish, they're stealing from the kohen. Make no mistake, they're violating theft, but they're not also eating something holy. So for that, the Mishnah is saying that the chaimish is asura lezarim. In other words, the chaimish has the status of truma or chala. And therefore, the problem of someone taking that chaimish, well, against the will of the owner, that's a theft. Even if the owner who received the chaimish wants to shear the chaimish, can't with a non-kohen, because it's now also imbued with the kedusha of truma. Another rule back in the Mishnah regarding both chala and truma, vehei nichsei kohen, they are considered personal property of the kohen. In contrast, Chavra, let's quickly review by Meiser Sheni. We have a machloikes Tanoim. According to Rav Meir, Meiser Sheni, which is not as holy as Truma, but Meiser Sheni is considered divine property. So the Rav Meir says if a person who owns the Meiser Sheni wants to consecrate a woman, and for that, from the 3 options is kesef, including shava kesef. Today you give a ring. You don't have to. You can give anything that has the value of a pruta or more. What happens if the owner of Meiser Sheni gives the Meiser Sheni to a woman? Hareyat mikudeshesli be Meiser Sheni zu kedas Moshe v'Yisrael. She knows it's Meiser Sheni. She knows, but it has value. You can't eat it anywhere, but you can eat it in Yerushalmi. Rav Meir holds she's not mikudeshes. Why is she not mikudeshes? Because it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to God. God gives you the right to eat it off his table, so to say. So in contrast to Meiser Sheni, the Mishnah says, Truma on one hand is holier. You're not chayv misa b'dei shamayim if you eat Meiser Sheni outside Yerushalayim. You're going to get malchus. You're not going to get misa b'dei shamayim. You don't have to pay a chaimish. But on the other hand, Truma and Chala is personal property of the kohen. A kohen can be mekadosh a woman with it. Amazing. Another din, which both Chala and Truma share the common law, that v'oilen be'echad umeya, that midrabanan, when there is a mixture of Truma and non-Truma, Chala and non-Chala, min b'minoi, even though midoi raisa, it's batal b'roiv, midrabanan, you have to have the ratio of not 60, 100 to 1. Only then is it nullified. And by the way, on top of that, midrabanan, even when there is nullification, you can't eat all of the 101. You have to take any one and give it to the kohen. So at least there's no gezel hashevet, b'loshen chazal. Another nuance, according to the Rambam, echad b'meya is min b'minoi. Min b'she'enoi minoi, even by truma, you only have to have b'nois and tam, which we paskin is 60 to 1. Next halach, both truma and chala, utu'unen lechitzas yodayim, that you have to wash your hand prior to eating it. What's the novelty over here? First of all, step number 1, we had this in Shabbos from the Shemaina Asar Davar, that the Chazal were misaken that stam yodayim shniyos. Yodayim askoni same. So that's number one. B'chlal midoiraisa, either you are tamei or you are tahor. No such a thing as your body part is tamei. Midrabanan, just the hand is tamei. On what level of tuma? Sheni. Now, since we don't paskin like Rabbi Akiva, psachim in that sugya, right? That the Gabbai loves, the end of the first chapter, we paskin that chulin can only max become a sheni. Food of chulin can never become a shlishi. If I eat chulin biyodayim, stam yodayim, what am I doing? I'm not affecting anything. Why not? Because my hands are a sheni. The chulin cannot become a shlishi. But if I'm eating truma or challah, truma and challah can become even shlishi tamei. So my yodayim can passel the truma. You got that? And by the way, that's the reason why we wash right now. The reason why we wash right now before we have a su'udah is to remind ourselves that Mashiach is about to come. And we're going to go back to properly giving truma and separating challah and Eretz Yisrael, and we're gonna have the dinim of Tumen Tara to remind the kohanim that prior to eating they have to wash their hands. All of the Jewish people wash their hands before they have a meal, or in the Seder night before we're eating something that was dipped into water. Okay. Next in that both for challah and truma v'ha'aref shemesh, which means that if a person was tamei on the level of an av, and they went to the mikvah, even though concerning meiser sheni, they can eat meiser sheni, they're no longer tamei. But for truma and for challah, it's not enough that they went to the mikvah. They have to wait until the end of sunset. The end of sunset, head of shemesh, really means the beginning of Tzeisak Yechavim, which is connected to the first Mishnah in Shas, right? And prior to that, there is a residual level of Tuma on the person which won't allow them to eat Truma and Challah because of the Kedusha that is imbued in them. The next law, Ve'enam nitalim min hatoir ala tamei. This is such a good Mishnah to review all of these halachas. When it comes to the separating of Truma, if I have aviv 2 piles of produce, and I'm an average guy, meaning I'm giving 2%, well, I have option. I can give from each pile 2%. If I want, I can take off 4%, in other words, 2%, and another 2%, giving from one pile for the other. But for that, there's a couple of qualifications. Number one, they both have to share the same obligation. They both have to be from the same year. They both have to be tahor, right? You can't give min hatamei ala toir or min hatoir ala tamei. Now, what happens if I have one pile that's tahor, one pile is tamei? I understand why I cannot separate min hatamei al hatoir. It's not fair for the kohen, because if I'm separating truma from produce that's tamei, I have to separate truma. But when the kohen will get it, that has much less value. What can the kohen do with that? Use it for fuel. He can have hana, but he can't eat it. So if I have a tahor pile and a tamei pile, it's understandable why you can't give from the tamei for the tahor, because you're jipping the kohen. He's getting something of less value. But why would one not be allowed to give min hatahor al hatamei? Isn't that for the benefit of the kohen? Because if I'm going to give 2% from each pile for itself, the kohen is going to get 2%. Let's say there's 100 apples in each pile. He's getting 2 apples that are tahor, 2 apples that are tamei. If I'm going to be mafresh min hatoir ala tamei, he's going to get the same 4 apples, but all of them will be tahor. So why would I not be allowed to do that? The answer is because since truma has to be given min hamukaf means that if I'm giving from one pile for another pile, they have to be in close proximity. They don't have to be touching. But a person might not know that. A person might think they have to actually touch each other. So I'm going to take these 2 piles and I'm going to bring them so close together that one will touch the other. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to expand, I'm going to proliferate tumah. Something that was tahor might absorb tumah from the tamei pile. So that's why Chazal said, not only may you not give min hatomei al hator, but you may not even give min hatoir al hatomei. That's this Mishnah. Why? Because you give it min hamukov. And that's the next line in the Mishnah. Ella, how should Truma be separated? If you have a Tomei pile and a Tahar pile, each pile should have Truma removed from it only for it. And when I have two piles that are both Tahar or both Tomei from the same year, more or less the same quality, the same species, then I could separate from one on the other, but don't forget, it has to be min hamukaf. It has to be in close proximity. And that excludes, in contrast to Meiser, for example, Meiser does not have to be given min hamukaf. And we learned that before in Yerushalmi. The logic behind that is that since Meiser has to be given exact 10%, so it doesn't make a difference, do the math. The math doesn't lie. You're going to give the exact amount. You're going to give 10%. But if you're giving approximately 2%, Truma is given in approximation, it's not meant to be exact, but it has to be in close approximation. And if it's not going to be both in front of you, you're going to be off. That's the meaning. Element hamukaf. Another rule, that umin hadavar hagamur, that Truma and Chala is only triggered when it's considered completed. Now, the completed of Truma and Chala are not the same, but it's the same idea. When do you have to separate Truma? Gemar Melacha. We learned so much about each product, what is its Gemar Melacha when you're selling it in the market. If you're taking it home, in addition to the Gemar Melacha, it has to have Ri'iyas Pnei Habayis. And then Midrabanan, there's really 6 things. Ri'iyas Pnei Habayis / Chatzir and another 5. What triggers the obligation to separate Chala? Kneading the flour into a dough. Prior to which, that means if a person is mafresh Chala from the flour, didn't do anything. They both have to be min hadavar hagomer. That's the meaning of the Mishnah. Now, the last law in the Mishnah, in which Truma and Chala share a common rule, ha'omer, if someone says from their generous heart, kol goyrni Truma, my entire pile, everything that's in this silo is Truma. Or if a person says, my entire dough is Chala, you would think, wow, how beautiful. No, loy omar klum. That statement has no halachic validity. The definition both of Truma and Chala is that you are giving from yours, a portion to the kohen. Now, you can give 99% to the kohen if you want to be generous. You must leave something for yourself. That's very important. Look inside the Marafulda, the first, under the Gemara, the first wide line, because the Chala vitruma, both by Chala and Truma, it says the word Reishis. Now, we already had that before. What does Reishis mean? Especially by Truma, I get that Reishis means from the first. But how is it from the first? Bikurim is from the first. What do you mean Reishis? What does Chala mean, Reishis? Reishis means that there's going to be 2 parts. And what's the most important, the first you're giving to the kohen. But there has to be 2 for you to have the first. If there is only 1, there is no first. You came in first. You're having a race and you're the only one running. You didn't come in first. There has to be 2. So Reishis implies Reishis v'loy kol Reishis. Ubainon shiyu shiyareim nikarim. That is the last rule in the Mishnah. Starting with the Gemara, we already mentioned there are other rules that Chal and Truma share the common. They share the common halacha. We're going to get to that in a moment. But first, let's begin with the following. Why did the Mishnah even have to say, the Gemara is wondering, that Chala and Truma are both Chayav and Alei Misa? Like, it's almost like it's obvious that a non-kohen cannot eat Chala. The Torah calls it Truma. That's the way the Marafulda is trying to explain what the Gemara is getting to. And think about something amazing. What does the word Chala mean? People don't think that question because we're so accustomed to calling the bread we eat Shabbos Chala. We don't even think, what does Chala mean? What word does it come from? Think, you know the answer. Think of a word that's similar to the root of chala. Choil. Chulin. The word chala has in it some sort of understanding that it's not holy. And indeed, that's the chiddush of the Mishnah. One would have thought that the Torah calls chala truma, but the word chala means choil. So how do you reconcile? The wrong reconciliation would have been prior to separating the chala, nothing may be eaten. Similar to prior to separating truma, nothing may be eaten, right? It's called tevel. In other words, its separation is so important that prior to, everything is prohibited, like by truma. But once you separated it, one might have thought that itself doesn't have the kedusha of truma. The Torah calls it chala. That's why the Mishnah has to tell you no, that it's mamash truma. Let's read it inside. Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi, in the name of Rab Chanan, in the name of Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, that since the word chala means chulin, hayisi oimer, I would have said without the Mishnah, that once you separated the chala, muter legalgel bohem. Now, gilgul means to roll with it. Gilgul, if you rearrange the letters, also means lelagleg, to mak. That means that even without the Mishnah, the Torah calls it truma. But I would have thought that it's like matnas kona for those of us who are learning Rambam. I'll give you an example, right? So the bechar is both holy, and you have to give it to the kohen. What happens if the bechar gets a blemish? Then it's not holy. It doesn't have to be put on the altar. It doesn't even have to be redeemed, chiddush. But you have to give it to the kohen. You have to give it to the kohen. What did the Rambam tell us? We just had this. That people would, you know what people did? Many people felt like if it's holy, they're not going to steal from God. But once it got blemished, many people did not give it to the kohen. Because people, it's sad this, but people, holy, I'm not going to mess with holy. It's property of the kohen. Okay, so I'll take it. It was born in my flock. I'm only stealing. That's the meaning of legalgel or lelagleg. A person would say, yeah, you should give it to the kohen, but it's chulin. So I can play around with it. I can roll with it. I can mock. I can denigrate it. By what? By eating it. And people did that. I said by Bechar. It's not right, but it's different if it's only matnas kahuna that has no kedusha versus it's matnas kahuna that is holy. There, people would never dream of taking it from the kohen. Lefum kain sarach meimer. That's why the Mishnah had to tell you no, that chala and truma are equal. That even after you separated it, not only was it matir, the rest was it misakein, the tevel was it misakein, the remaining dough. More than that, it itself has the kedusha. To the point that if a non-kohen eats it b'mezid, chayav and aleya misa. Now the question is, so why does God call it chala? The Gemara is not addressing that. And to which I have no current answer. Just it's interesting. We're making a point. Chala means chulin. Before I learned this yesterday, I never even thought about that. Pashut, chala means chulin. Maybe we have a misunderstanding about chulin. We're calling something holy chulin. How strange. Truma means elevated, right? Hafrasha v'harama. Sounds nice. I elevated it. Yeah, because it's holy, so you elevated it.
Didn't challah grow on the tree?
Challah was like everything else. Yeah, challah is everything else. But once you separate challah, it's amazing also on Shabbos. The bread of the week, you don't call chulin. We call dafke, what we eat on Shabbos, we call challah means chulin. There's something here. Okay, I'll leave it at that. It's amazing. Okay, now we have a piece of Gemara that is not brought down on the Bavli, only here, and it works its way into the Shulchan Aruch. It works its way into our minig, and it's written in Shulchan Aruch. I'm going to read it in the Gemara, then I'm going to read the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. Says the Gemara, Eser mitzvahs adam oise ad shelo yochel prusa. Even prior to you eating a piece of bread, you already fulfilled 10 mitzvahs. Now, obviously, we're speaking about someone who lives in the Holy Land, which is amazing. What are the 10 mitzvahs? Well, we're going all the way to the beginning of the bread. The beginning of the bread, my friends, is not, how do you begin? Where would you go back to? Well, we're not going back to the creation of Adam and Chava. Okay, that's going back too much. We're going to the moment that you began to plow the field to plant the grain. When it comes to plowing, there's already a mitzvah, a negative mitzvah, which is mishum leisacharosh. Right? So we're not allowed to crossbreed animals, And then there's also, we cannot work with two animals of a different species. So in the plowing already, we fulfill the negative mitzvah of not plowing with two species of animals. Then when it comes to the planting, planting, there's also laws. What's the law of planting? Kalayim. We can't plant it near a vineyard, right? But about Tizra. Okay, now when it comes to the threshing, so there's a law of not muzzling the animal that's threshing, right? Bal tachsoim. So we already have 3 mitzvahs. It's amazing. Now, once we're not going exactly in the order. Again, we're speaking about produce that grew in the Holy Land. There are the 3 matnas aniyim called leket, shikhan, peah. So we had 3. We have another 3. Where are we up to? We're up to 6. Okay, now prior to Chala, you have another 3. What is the 3? Truma, Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni. By the way, Meiser Ani is a replacement of Meiser Sheni. It doesn't have to be mentioned. So that's 3. 3, Aviv is 9. The separation of Chala is the 10th. V'Chala. So there are 10 mitzvahs. And
wait, what about the mitzvah like not plowing or any of those?
So Aviv is asking, why don't we say an 11th? You can't work on Shabbos. Because it's only a 1 day in the week. So it's not a mitzvah that vadai you're keeping. What do I mean is that if I plow once a week on Mondays, so when I plow on Mondays, am I keeping Shabbos by? I'm not holding myself back on Shabbos. I was never going to plow on Shabbos to begin with. What's the rule of not plowing with 2 different animals is always there. They're every day, constant. The laws of Shabbos is not constant. It's not a constant mitzvah, but you're making a good point. Now let's just finish this. Rabbi Yitzchak kad osei mesav lidoi. When he would take bread in his hands, prior to which, meaning when he made the bracha, who pashat asterei etzba'asei, he would extend his 10 fingers, v'amar, and he would say, whether he said it or whether the extending of the 10 fingers and placing them on the bread when making the bracha, that act is saying, harei kiyamti yaseh mitzvahs. Here, indeed, I fulfilled 10 mitzvahs. I'm going inside the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. This is also brought down in the main Shulchan Aruch. But let's go to the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. In Oirach Chaim, Simin Kuf Samach Zayin, right? Hilchos B'tziyos Hapas. That's the Simin. Seif Katan Zayin, says the Alter Rebbe, Tzorech Sheyisvois Halechem B'Yiminoi. Really, when you make a bracha and everything, you're supposed to hold the item in your right hand. That's a rule for all foods. But in addition, but here it's even better, not only to hold the bread in your right hand, but to hold it in both hands. She'iten olav, shtei yadav, to place both of your hands with your fingers extended over the bread. Why is that? Sheyesh behem yud etzbos, because both of your hands have 10 fingers. Keneged mamash our gemara. Keneged yud mitzvahs hatulois bepas. Loisachrei shor bechamod. Zrias kalayim. Leked shikchopeya. Now, what we have in the over here is bikurim, trumois, maiserishon v'sheni. It's a problem because if you count them now, you're going to have 11. But I think that we put maiserishon and sheni together. This is a good kasha now because if you have, again, you have lisachrish, You have Leisizra, Balsachsoim, Leket, Shikha, Peya. If I'm going to go with Bikurim, Truma, Meiser Ishain, Meiser Sheni, boom. So Chala is the 11. That's a good point. I didn't have. V'chala. Somehow the 11 become 10. And then the Alter Rebbe adds, Lakach, Yesh, Yut, Tevois. That's why there are 10 words in the bracha of Hamoitzi. I know that we're not allowed to count people for a minyan. So I was always taught when you want to make sure there's a minyan, how do you count the people? You say, Hoshia Samecha. That's the way. Hoshia Samecha has 10 words. Hoshia es Samecha, Vorech es Nachlusecha, Uning Benasim ad ha'olam. You know what else you can count? Hamoitzi lechem min ha'aretz. That's here. Baruch ata Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam, hamoitzi lechem min ha'aretz. And how funny is that? Because Adam and Chava are like, we came from the earth.
Or don't we also do the 10 fingers in reverse when we're doing Havdalah? That's also the showing the fingers up, and
that's a whole different thing. It's nothing to do with 10 mitzvahs. We look at the fingers because we want to make use of the fire, and the use of the fire is to be mavdil, to discern between two parts of the body that without proper light you can't see your nail and your finger. And really, it's very deep because the nail represents klipa. And to see what's holy and what's unholy, you need a lot of discernment. The Yuteva is bepasuk matzmiya chatzel behema. The Yuteva is bepasuk ene choyle lecha yisaberu. The Yuteva is in the pasuk eretz chito sa'ira and parsha sekev. Amazing. Okay. Anyways, guys, it's getting late now. We have to move on. So here we go. Have a daf tez zayin omid beis. Let's finish for the Pedic and let's get moving. So now zakti gemara chala al hakoil and truma al hakoil, that what they share in common. Now I'm going to learn pshat in the Gemara, not like the Mishnah. The Mishnah already mentioned that you have to leave shirayim. Chala al hakoil, truma al hakoil means, we had this before, whether it was in Trumais or Meiser Sheni, somewhere in Yerushalmi. When I have a pile of grain, Aviv, and I separate truma, it's not uncommon that some kernels are not on the pile. Big piles. They're not physically in the pile. They rolled away. The truma that you separate goes for everything. Same thing with challah. I know you're separating it from the dough. What happens if when you made the dough, there's some little piece of lach that are not touching the dough? Doesn't matter. The separation goes for everything that's here. Number two, that the word lashem, that's written both by truma and by challah, zeh shem hamiyuchad. Now, Shem HaMeyuchad is very deep. Shem HaMeyuchad, the pshat would mean, is that they both demand for you to make a bracha. And when a bracha is made, V'Shem u'Malchus, Baruch Ata Hashem, we make a bracha both when we're mafresh truma, and we make a bracha when we're mafresh the challah. The chiddush of the Shem HaMeyuchad is that whenever you do an act of separating, Al Pi Kabbalah, what is the Shem of God, Aviv, that connotes separation? Bina, Shem Elokim. Shem Hashem is Shem HaMeyuchad. Meyuchad means it unifies. So one would think that an act of separating the holy from the mundane, for that you don't use Shem Hashem, you use Shem Elokim. No. So this is the vart. Maybe that's connected to the chulin. That what happens when a person separates the holy from the mundane, don't look at it as if now there's a division. Actually, this creates unity. Unity doesn't mean there is only one. Unity means that there is a division inside the unity of God. The ultimate expression of Hashem's unity, Echad, is that there is 7 heavens and an earth. You have 4 directions, and Hashem is the ruler in it and over it and outside of it. The unity of Hashem has in it the power to unite all of the opposite parts. Maybe that's the meaning of chulin, that this is the ultimate is the elevation of the chulin, where something is called chayil, that which remains, and that itself is holy. Let's go weiter. Now, finally, minayin, this goes on the last thing in the Mishnah, minayin shlo yasa klum. How do you know that if a person, out of their good intent, they wanted to separate everything as truma, the whole dough as challah, the Mishnah says it's ineffective. Lo yomar klum. Achi Yeshayim Mixas, you have to leave epis, something for yourself. Talmud Loimer, we learned this in the Marafulda. But here, it's not from the word Reishis, it's from the word made Reishis. Made Reishis. Veloy kol Reishis. As the last Marafulda in the Amit says, in the Pedic says, Koloimer she'en kol isa nikras Reishis. Ella chelek mimeno. Okay. For that we say, Hadron Allah Chamisha Devarim, we're coming back to you. We're not running away. We're going to miss you, but we'll return. And now let's quickly start. Let's see how far we can get. I hope we can finish the Mishnah. The second chapter, Pedic Beis, Pedic Pedis, Halacha Aleph. First rule in the Mishnah we spoke out in the intro is that Chala Mido'ayraisa is a mitzvah hatuluya ba'aretz. But it's very unlike Trumas U'Maisres. Trumas U'Maisres are connected to where did it grow. If it grew in Israel, chayiv. If it grew outside Eretz Yisrael, midoiraisa, it's exempt. Midrabanan, countries near Eretz Yisrael, then also have to have Trumas U'Maisra separated from its produce. Chala is biblically noyeg ba'aretz, but it's not about where it grew only, or maybe at all, machlekes tanoim, it's where did you knead the dough. And therefore, peidos here means grains. Okay, peidos that grew in Chutz La'aretz. The wheat grew in LA, but you imported it into the Holy Land. Shenichnasu la'aretz. Point is that it was kneaded into the dough in the boundaries of the Holy Land. You're chayiv midoiraisa to be mafresh chala. Now, do we say it both ways? Machlokes tanoim. No, if it's only about where it was needed, then I would argue if produce grew in Eretz Yisrael, but they exported it, and someone needed that flour here in LA, then you would say, well, then mido'iraisa, you're not chayiv. That's a machlokes tanoim. Yotzu mikan l'sham. Mikan is here in Israel. L'sham means anywhere out of Israel. Rabbi Eliezer says you're also chayiv. According to Rabbi Eliezer, there are two triggers for challah. Where did it grow? Or where was it needed? If either or are met, you're chayiv midoiraisa. Rabbi Akiva holds no. It's consistent. There is one mechayiv for challah. What? Where it was needed. Mitzvah hatuluya ba'aretz, meaning where was it needed? Gavaldik. Not where it grew. Now that the Mishnah spoke about imported produce, exported produce, we're going to go on a topic that we'll learn a lot more next off, just to clarify. What happens if the earth is imported? You have earth that was put on a boat outside Eretz Yisrael. It's gush chutz la'aretz. And the ship entered the territorial waters of Eretz Yisrael. With a lot more nuance, whether the ship is touching the earth in the ocean, whether or not the machlokes tanoim. Obviously, the ship has to be made of a material that halachically has pores. It's porous, either earthenware ship or a wooden ship. We'll leave that next year. But there is a certain zika, there's a certain connection between that which is growing in the earth of Chutz La'aretz and the earth underneath the ocean floor. So says the Mishnah, Afar Chutz La'aretz. Remember when we were kids, they used to bring from Israel these little things of glass that had colorful earth, and they convinced you it came from Israel. But that's the opposite. That's bringing earth of Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. Also, and for a sad, but I think it could be that the Chevra Kadisha, they have earth of Eretz Yisrael. So if a person is interred here, they put some off at Eretz Yisrael. But here it's in the opposite direction. You have Afar Chutz La'aretz. Shabab Esfina La'aretz. So in certain circumstances, if something is growing in this earth after it entered the territorial boundaries of Eretz Yisrael, biblically, that will be chayiv b'maisres u'b'shviyas. How amazing is that? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Emosai, that's not so pashut. That's only bisman shasfino goy sheshesh. That's only when the ship is touching the ground. The ship is not touching the ground. That means now a ship touching the ground. What are we talking? Yeah, a ship can be so close to the ground. I'm talking about in the water. It's touching the ground. Low tide. According to the Chachamim, it doesn't have to touch the ground. We're going to leave that for the next year. I just want to finish the Mishnah. Now, let's go back to the dinam of Challah. What happens if you have a dough that was kneaded b'mei peiros? Mei peiros is midoi raiso. There are 7 liquids, 7 halachic liquids. What's the 7 halachic liquids? Aviv, yad, shochat, dam. That's the mnemonic. Yayin, dvash, shemen, cholov, kal, and then dam, mayim. Those 7 liquids are machshir. What happens if someone used apple juice to make a dough? Now, you can make a dough because when you're making a dough, all you need is something that will make the flour adhere to each other. Works. Are you chayiv in challah? People don't think about that. Do we say that the chiyuv biblically of challah is only when you make it with water or at least with the other liquid? Says the Mishnah, no. It doesn't make a difference. Isa sheneloisha b'mei peiros is equally chayiv b'challah, but there is a difference. The difference between the 7 halachic liquids and all other liquids is whether you're going to be machshir the food. So if you made it with mei peiros, this challah, which is holy, may be eaten by a kohen, biyadayim misoyavos, with unclean hands. Why? Because even if, don't think that just touching food imparts truma. Doesn't work that way. I know we just mentioned truma can become a shlishi, poisel betruma, but medvaram amurim that the food first became muchshar lekabel truma, and if the grains never got wetted after it was cut off the earth, and now the dough was maybe made peiros, then you have no issue if it was touched in impure hands. And the final Mishnah, a woman may separate challah while she's unclothed. The chiddush is that prior to doing the mitzvah, you make a bracha. And God's name may not be taken when a person is unclothed. A person has to have their private parts, their erva covered. Not with their own body. I can't use my hand to cover my erva. Me covering me is not covering. Or like by a yamelka, but when I make a bracha, me putting my hand on my head, I can't make a bracha. I'm not covered. I can't cover myself with myself. But the way the physical body of a woman is that if she's sitting, then the earth is covering her erva. Mikan, that a bracha could be made while sitting. Because physically a man is created by God in a way where even if he's sitting on the ground, the erva is exposed. And you can't use your hand. So a man has to be covered, his private parts, with something other than him, with a different entity. And a woman could be mafresh challah even when she's unclothed. Here at Kan the Mishnah, God willing, next year, beginning with the Gemara.